As we move deeper into the world of coding and interactivity, it soon becomes obvious to us that we cannot do much without the use of conditional statements. Conditional statements are blocks of code that allow us to have one or several outcomes depending on a condition being met. So, as an example, for this exercise, I want to have this airplane moving across the screen, and the condition will be that when the airplane reaches this side, then it bounces right back out to this side. It reappears on this side and continues on moving horizontally across the screen. I also want to create a condition that makes it move randomly on the y-axis of the stage. So things that we need to keep in mind. The first thing is the stage has a width, and the value of the width of the stage is stage width. So that's a keyword that we need to know. You'll see it in the code in a few minutes. Same thing with height. Stage.stage height is the height of my stage. So those are values that we know. As I told you at the beginning of the class, in every computer in the world, the coordinate system starts on the upper left-hand corner. That means this point here is your 0, 0 point in regards to the stage. So this value here is 0 for x and 0 for y. Over here, the value would be stage.stage width. Over here, the value would be stage.stage height. And like I said, I'll show you how that is typed in just a second. So this is the height, this is the width of the stage. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the movie clip airplane that I have here. Now, you'll notice that I have my anchor point for animation on the timeline here in the center, the one that I can move with my free transform tool, that y dot. But if you notice on the upper left-hand corner, that's where I have the registration point for this movie clip. So this is my XY reference for that movie clip. Anytime I refer to X or Y in terms of that movie clip, I will be referencing that specific point. So with keeping these two things in mind, the condition then should be that if the X value of my airplane is bigger than the width of my stage, meaning the plane moved across and it's now the X value is past that point, the stage width, then I should make the X value of my plane something like this, move it back here. Now, what is this value here? Well, I could numerically add a number in there if I want to, but if I notice my airplane has a width as well, just like the stage has a width, that clip has a width as well. And let's assume for a second that this value is 100. So let's assume that the value for that plane clip, it's 100 pixels. If I say make the position X of the plane negative its width, then that would be, if my plane is here, that would be a value of 0 on the X. Anything behind the X or to the left of the X would be a negative value. You can see that by looking at my position and size for the clip as I am dragging it. So if I place it here, let's place it at 0. That's where the airplane would be at 0. If I move it back here, my plane would be at negative 79. So the width of my clip is around, let's say, 79 pixels. So I know this, and I don't want to use those numbers. What I want to use is those reference values that I've been talking about. So we have stage width. We also have the clip, whatever the clip is going to be called, most likely plane. And so that would be plane.width, and that would be the width of my plane. So the condition is, if the X value of the plane clip is greater than the width of the stage, then set the X value of the plane clip to negative its width value. And so let's go ahead and get that started. Let's go ahead and open up the actions window, F9 on the keyboard, or window actions. And I'm going to be using a snippet in this case. We're working on a Swift file, on a Flash file, so we're going to be using the action script snippets. So let's go ahead and open that up, and we want to create an animation on this. First things first, for that clip to be recognized by the code, I need to give it an instance name in its properties. So I'm going to call that plane. Notice that I have the clip selected, and then I gave it the name plane. Now, what I want to do is I want to keep it selected, and I want to go to action script, and I want to create an animation on this of the thing moving across the screen. So let me move this out of the way and go to animation, and I want to animate horizontally. So if I double click on that, It's going to add the code onto the screen, onto my actions window. It creates a new layer called actions, and it puts the actions on the first frame. So that's what I want. The code that was added has this grayed out text, which is the comments area, and it explains what the code is going to do. But let me walk you through what this is. So the plane, it's my event target. This is what's triggering the target, the actual action, the plane. So the actual movie, the code is looking for an event. An event that happens all the time, as I've explained before, is called an enter frame. And that is when you play back the movie, enter frame is constantly playing. So if you need to create an animation that's moving all the time, enter frame would be the listener, the actual event that you should be listening for. So the plane movie, the movie plane, is listening. We're adding a listener to that movie clip, and the listener is listening for an enter frame event. That is the syntax for this. Then we say comma, and then when that event is met, then we call this function. Now the function was defined by you, for you by the program, and it gave it a name. And then below it, it actually does the actual definition of the function. The function says, when I get called, when this function gets called by the event, then do this. Now remember, plane is my event target. So if I want to switch my word plane inside the function by event target, then it's going to work just fine because it is plane that is calling this function. So I can either keep it as plane or I can call it event.target. So if I do that, it's going to say the event target, which is my plane movie, its X value, add 10 pixels to it every time you enter the frame. So if my value is 0 right now, then the next time it would be 10, the next time it would be 20, the next time it would be 30, and so on and so forth. That would move my movie clip towards the right on the x-axis. Remember, towards the right downstream is positive, past this point in that direction is negative. So if we're subtracting, we would be moving left. If we're adding, we would be moving right. So my event target, which is the plane, the X value of my event target, the X value of plane, is going to be receiving 10 pixels every time I enter the frame. If I test this movie right now, the plane should move across the screen. And then it would just continue on moving on forever. Now what I want to do is the conditional. And the conditional will go inside that function. So right after the line of code that is moving the plane, which is this one, I'm going to place my cursor after the semicolon. And remember, semicolons close code. So anytime you finish a line of code, you need to put a semicolon at the end of it. So I'm going to hit return on this or enter, and then I'm going to type up my conditional statement. Now, conditional statements read almost like in English. So this is the syntax for it. You would say if, and then open a parentheses. Inside the parentheses is where you're going to be adding the condition. So you're going to say if my plane, which is event.target.x, if the x value, remember, the condition was if the plane's x is greater than the stage width. So if the event target x is greater than stage width, that means if my plane reaches this end over here, if the tail of my plane, the x value, reaches this point, then do what? At this point, I am going to open up little squiggly brackets like this ones. Up here, I'm going to open up a squiggly bracket at that end and hit enter or return. You will notice that the code automatically gives you the closing squiggly. You need to have one that opens and one that closes. It automatically gives it to you when you do it the way I just did. And then it's going to say, what do you want to happen? Well, I want the plane to go back in that direction. And that is, I need to give it an x value that equals negative the value of the width of the plane, right? That's what we said. So let me select the code again, and I'm going to enter that value. So in this case, event.target.x equals negative the value of the width of the target. So event, or in other words, the width of plane. Event.target.width. Semicolon. So it's going to say, if my plane x value is greater than the width of the stage, then place the x value of the plane at negative the value of its width, whatever the value happens to be. Now, why am I using this code? Why am I not saying plane, 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 and why am I not using numbers? Because if I use numbers, I am stuck with just using this specific function with this particular clip and with this particular setup. But if I use event target, I can reuse this code with anything that is calling this function. So anything that is event target, whether the plane is this size or if it's 3 times as wide, I'm not going to have to retouch the code because it's going to say event target width, and it's going to look at the clip and it's going to say, oh, well, this clip is 80 pixels, but this one is 200. It doesn't matter to the code. The code is going to say, well, you're saying event target width, whatever the width is. If it's 200, I'll use 200. If it's 80, I'll use 80. So that's how this is extremely useful. That's why I choose to use generic code instead of numbers. So the code, and mind the syntax. It's something that it's always a mistake. It's 99% of the time it is an error on the syntax that will not let your programs run properly. So let's go ahead and test this. And you see the plane is going across, and then it's going to bounce to the other side and come out again. So it's going to just continuously loop as it goes across the screen. Now, if I want to randomize the position on the y-axis, then I'm going to make use of an expression called math_random. So at the end of if my event target, if my condition is met, then send the plane to the other side, and then at the same time, so right after that line of code, it's still inside my if statement, I am going to type the randomizing on the y-axis. So event.target.y equals, and this is the expression to randomize things, math with a capital M dot random, and math_random open close parentheses. That expression gives you any value between 0 and 1. This expression provides you with a value anywhere between 0 and 1. So how is that helpful? Well, if I multiply this, the stage height, then my possible values would be, if on the lowest end, math_random will provide me with a 0. So it would be 0 times the stage height equals 0. So that's where my plane will appear. Anywhere between 0 and 1. So if I get the highest possible value, which is 1 times stage height, it's the bottom portion. So I can get any number, any position in between the top and the bottom of my stage. So if I get math_random times stage dot stage height, then I am randomizing the position on the y-axis when it goes back. It's saying, place the y-axis, the y value of the plane randomly anywhere on the height of the stage. So when I test this movie, now you're going to see that the plane is basically going to appear up and down. Let me test it again. The plane is basically going to appear randomly up or down on the height of the stage. So once again, the conditional statement is basically a statement that says, if something is met, then do something, else don't do anything. And so this if statement will not be executed until this condition is met. So in terms of how the program runs, programs run from top to bottom. So the plane receives a listener and is listening for an enter frame. When the condition's met, when that enter frame happens, when the event happens, then we call a function. The function then will say, okay, I am going to be moving that event target, which is the plane, by 10 pixels to the right. If the event target, meaning if the plane X its X position is larger than the width of the stage, then do all this. Now, if it's not, then skip it. It doesn't do anything that's inside the if statement, inside the conditional. So this conditional only happens when the plane reaches this side of the stage. Those are conditional statements.